like one possible prediction that you did not draw is that in the court setting, actually the precise message to the judge should be conceived of as being serving the purpose and thereby being solidarity conforming, but at least in these anti-solidarity measures, if I remember correctly, it wasn't significant, but there was a tendency to in the same direction as in the other cases.
Yes, so at least in one of the situations, so I'm not totally happy with anti-solidarity as a label because it's not the mirror image of solidarity.
Mm-hmm.
It's the dimensions of pedantic and uptight. I mean, those were the underlying attributes. There is a little bit of an effect,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't expect it there. I think we didn't expect the speaker there would be perceived as more pedantic and uptight. The precise speaker in that situation where precision is called for, but it's certainly a smaller effect. And if I remember right, it's only one of those two attributes where there was an effect. So there's definitely less effect in that what we call the for the record context. So those
Mm-hmm.
negative associations of precision don't come up to this, don't arise at the same level as they do in the we're trying to make friends sort of context.
Yeah, thank you. That was clear. Yeah, I forgot a bit about how anti-solidarity was pedantic is. Yeah,
I can't think of a better term than that, but so that's the one we've used, and that's the one we have in the paper. But it's something more specific than anti-solidarity or lack of solidarity.
Manfred?
Yeah, hi. So I have one question. Do you think that you would get the same result if you would have tested the approximate condition with approximately instead of about? It seems that that there is a difference, at least as I can see, that someone with using approximately in exactly the situations that you have would not have projected the same persona for some reason. I don't know whether you have the same feeling. And also instead of about, one could have tested things with like, with the hedge, like. And it might be that it's not specifically approximation, but you mentioned that we don't know with about why a speaker chooses to be approximate, lack of knowledge, or the intention to make it easier for the addressee. So there might be different reasons in terms of, say, lack of knowledge that could be expressed by either about or a hedge like. It might be that about has a reading that is like for scalar items. And then it might be that the use of hedges projects this solidarity effect and not approximation as such. Just an idea.
No, I think that's quite likely. We actually were faced with a question of which approximator or approximating construction would we use for our approximate items. We picked about and around because they're the most common ones. So that was just like an easy decision. I also very strongly have the intuition that there's subtle differences between them. I actually get a little bit of a difference between about, which for me is very compatible with the rounding off interpretation, and around, which tends to signal a little more speaker uncertainty to me. And it's something I would love to look at.
Thanks.
So we took like the easy ones. But yeah, I mean, that's the basic thing we realized when we were looking at these results is that precise forms are specific in a sense that approximate forms are not. So approximate forms are compatible with different situations in terms of the speaker's epistemic state, and choices, where precise forms essentially always require always are a choice. Anytime a speaker uses a precise form, it's a choice, and there could have been other choices.
Can I ask a little follow-up? That sort of was related to that. I was wondering, in the pictures, the gender of these characters was different, right? I wasn't paying attention. Like, was they all female?
Across the four?
Yeah,
Context?
yeah.
It's always actually the same characters. It's
Oh, I
always
see. Okay,
a
I
male
was
speaker
confused.
and a female asking the question.
I took the first at least to be a female speaker, and but yeah, okay.
No, it's
Maybe I missaw that.
It's actually something that I only saw sort of after the fact. Is you sort of expect the individual on the left to be the question asker and the individual on the right to be the answerer, and it's actually reversed. So that's. But no, it's actually we hold the speaker and the interlocutor contact constant.
Okay.
And put them in different situations.
I know you would be taking care of that. Okay. David, you have a question? David Beaver?
Yes, yes.
You may.
So thank you, Stephanie, for answering the question I asked at the last talk. I feel I ought to ask a question for the next talk now, but I just wanted to pick up on what Manfred said about the possible relevance of hedging. So, so I really like the study, but just to play devil's advocate, I'm wondering what one might be able to explain or predict based on just some assumptions about, firstly, cooperativity, and secondly, standard politeness theory. So, expressing uncertainty as, or explicitly using hedging methods, speaker uncertainty is associated with various. It's complex, so I won't go through predictions of politeness theory, but it predicts that in some circumstances you would be, avoiding conflict, basically. Yeah, and it's complicated because in some cases, being aggressive can be a form of positive politeness, but I think not in the scenarios that you described. That wouldn't be the first interpretation. So one could understand what's happening in a courtroom situation as where people are inclined to be, where one doesn't judge precision as being in any way indicating a problem, right? That could be motivated by general considerations of cooperativity. And then in the other scenarios, you might have just standard politeness predicting that hedging, as Manfred put it, or more generally, not expressing high expertise. So the idea would be that roughly expressing high expertise is making life difficult for the hearer, putting yourself above them in some way, right? So the question is, could those factors possibly explain this type of data, or what experiments would you expect these parameters to work differently from other manipulations of politeness?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, I think that's very much what's going on here. I don't think these factors are specific to numerical imprecision or precision.
So that would suggest that this talk was not an answer to the question I asked Anton, because if at least your explanation is different. That is, it's difficult to distinguish marking what group you belong to, which was the kind of interpretation that Anton gave to his abstract models, from marking your marking whether someone's being friendly, whether someone is being, trying to get into a coalition or separate. It's difficult to distinguish those factors. But if I accept your interpretation of your data, then it's not marking group membership and coalition in the way that Anton perhaps was suggesting in his model.
I think I'd say two things for this. I tend to think personally that it's not about group membership as much about signaling a particular state or stance in a given communicative setting. I think we all go back and forth between being more precise and less precise in different situations. Now where I think I line closer to what Anton had suggested there was I do think speakers can use these associations proactively to suggest a particular persona in a particular setting. So I do think that a speaker can use the the competence boosting associations that can come with precision to present themselves as competent in a given situation. So it's not all just sort of receptive that the speaker reacts to the situation and then the hearer does their thing and draws inferences to that. I do think there's another level of it that is the speaker proactively using these potential indexical meanings to shape.
So I completely agree. I don't have any argument with that. I think that's the right way to think about things. I guess what I'm wondering is what variations on the experiments might help differentiate the factors that you just described as being certainly relevant from the other factors to do with general issues of politeness, which will be certainly related, like politeness levels will relate to group structure. So it's not that these are unrelated, but they're slightly different stories. And I'm wondering what sorts of experiments will differentiate.
So that's something I'd have to give some more thought to. One sort of experiment we have in mind is one in which we more explicitly control for the speaker's knowledge state, because we expect that's going to have some more clear, result in some more sort of clear social perceptions, particularly of the approximate form. The other thing, we actually did some earlier experiments. So here we focused on different sort of speech settings that, as you point out, could have sort of different requirements for being, for being polite or hedging or not putting yourself out there, too much. The other sort of experiments we've, not like highlighting your expertise. The other sort of experiments we've looked at has looked at varying in a more fine-grained way the speaker's desire, the hearer's need for precision. So that's like the I have a meeting at 11 o'clock versus I have a meeting at 11:30 sort of example. So these are casual conversations where somebody asks for some information, and what we vary is sort of how crucial is it to get the precise answer. Like in that meeting situation. So if I have a meeting, let's say now what time it is, if I have a meeting at 17:20 here, it matters if it's 17:15 or 17:14 or what have you, but not if I have a meeting at 19 hours. And we found, and so I think that takes politeness. I don't want to say it takes politeness out of it, but it sort of
I would simply say, so when I asked the question originally, I said an interplay of cooperativity and politeness. So I think it's a really nice suggestion for a kind of practical way that the context might affect the preference for delivering different types of information. Completely agree. I think it's like really clever, but I don't find it particularly challenging. It's going to increase the utility for exchanging certain types of information, which will presumably mask some politeness effects. I agree with that. I'm not sure it gets to the question of how we would separate kind of group coalitional, group marking, identity marking from other factors, though. So that's something to think about separately.
That point I have to give some more thought to.
Right. There's one more question by Sally Haslinger. I'm sorry if I didn't notice at first because we were using the chat primarily.
Oh, no worry, I just put it up. It was kind of a follow-up. So in the United States, in the Black community, there's this thing called CPT or BPT, and that means colored people's time or Black people's time. And you show yourself to be incompetent if you show up at the time that is designated, because you show yourself as a white person. Like, I know that I spend a lot of time in Black communities. I've learned this. If you are a white person and someone says, let's meet at 2 and you show up at 2, you are utterly incompetent. And if you expect people to show up at the time that you specify, it's impolite. And so I'm just curious about whether you've looked at, the range of cultural norms and the range of communities that you've been looking at.
No, we haven't looked at that. We know there's an entire other set of factors that come into this. Particularly, I think there's something particular about time expressions. And although one of the things I should have clarified, although I've been using time expressions as an example, we tested all sorts of numerical expressions, cardinalities and distances and so forth. Yeah, no, there's factors about time and how we talk about time and what we really mean when we specify a time that are definitely beyond the scope of what we've done here.
I was thinking in part what David's question, because I mean, I reveal myself as an incompetent white person in Black communities, in part by how I specify time when I show up for things and things like this. So there's a kind of issue of politeness, but also of social identity that sort of plays a role in this. And it's just food for thought, nothing critical, just.
It also suggests that there's a lot of dimensions of competence that beyond sort of what we're talking here, which is sort of strictly about, and maybe I should have said it's strictly about what knowledge of the facts at hand, should we say?
No, it just is, so competence, cultural competence is huge when you're dealing, and I think, social skills, so social fluency has to do with kind of cultural competence. I mean, for those of you who don't know, I'm a parent of Black children. And so I have you know, I need to educate my children into the ways of Black American culture, and it's a constant sort of code switching process that my children and I are involved in, and a lot of the language we use and the behaviors and the practices that we're engaged in are become highly visible as we're doing these code switches.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks. That's really interesting.
Thanks to you again, Stephanie, for this wonderful talk. And we end at 5:20, and we start after the 10-minute break at exactly 5:30 Berlin time again.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.